Every breath that we take is orchestrated and controlled and delivered by a presence that is invisible. And there's only one of it. It's in everything that exists in the physical world. The stones, the animals, the plants, us. It's this intelligence. And we carry it around with us at all times. This divine mind, this I am presence, it's always there. Finding me. How do you find me? And union. The whole purpose, what I want to talk about, the rest of my life, or at least the next few years of it, if I'm granted them, because again, that's not up to me either. When you get called, you get called. You know, he often says in there that, you know, you showed up here in the 20th century. Why didn't you show up 100 years from now? Why did you show up in this country and not in another country? Something is taking care of all of that for you. You don't have the power to be able to do these things. And we carry around this divine intelligence that's capable of doing anything, that is omniscient and omnipotent and all-knowing. It's everywhere at once. We have that within us. We carry it around wherever we go. It's this incredible intelligence. And we all carry it around, and yet we act like we are weak. And we have a subconscious mind that has been programmed to believe that we're ordinary. And we can't create miracles, and we can't accomplish fantastic things. I've just discovered that within me there's this miracle worker who is capable of manifesting and creating. I mean, just all of this stuff that I've written and all of these things that I'm doing, even my giving this talk right now, it's not my personality that is doing it. Every desire that you have is placed there by something that you have no control over. Every desire, every thought. In the Tao, it says, Lao Tzu says, 2,500 years ago, you're not doing anything, you're just being done. You're just being done. If you don't believe that, just look in the mirror. Many of you know I've just published a new book, which is somewhat of a memoir, but I didn't write it with that intent, or an autobiography. It's really a look at all of the significant people and the events and the circumstances and the things that have showed up in my life, and to look back on them from the time that I was just a baby and the years that I spent in an orphanage and a series of foster homes. Throughout my years and having a difficult time as a teenager in school, getting kicked out several times, fighting the system all the way, refusing to fit in, listening to an inner voice that kept prodding me in a direction that you've probably heard me tell it. I'll tell it again. It's when I was in the 3rd grade. I was in a home out in Mount Clemens, Michigan, and it was a brand new school, but I was in a new school every year, the first 10 years of my life. So 1st grade, 2nd grade, I just kept changing homes and schools and places. With my brother David, who was a year and a half older than I am, but much smaller, and was bullied a lot, so I had to take care of him as well. And I came home from school. I was living with Mrs. Scarf at 231 Town Hall Road in Mount Clemens, Michigan. And I asked her, what's a scurvy elephant? And she said, a what? I said, what's a scurvy elephant? She said, well, where did you hear that? I said, well, I heard Mrs. Poole, who was my 3rd grade teacher, tell the principal after class, on the first day of class, that Wayne Dyer was in her classroom and he was a scurvy elephant. I wanted to know what it meant. So she got on the phone. Yes, they had phones then, for those of you. my kids with their... And she called, and the principal said, "Oh, no, that's Wayne. He gets everything mixed up." She didn't say that he was a scurvy elephant in her classroom. She said that he was a disturbing element in her classroom. And I, of course, I've told that story 1,000 times, but and I've had people send me little weird-looking elephants. I've got a whole collection of them from all over the world. But it's been a part of the journey, is to be somewhat of a disturbing element in my life. After getting out of high school and just barely making it through high school, I joined the United States Navy for 4 years. And you can imagine how someone who's a scurvy elephant fits into a place where everybody is told how to dress and what to say and how to think and where to be, and you're not even allowed or thought to think for yourself at all. And I wrote about that and all of the significant events and people that showed up in my life. And this is what the book looks like. I can see clearly now. And there is a quote at the very beginning of chapter 1. And this is not really a self-help book, but it's a book that, as people write reviews, and there's about 100 or so reviews now on Amazon, and people say it's been the most helpful book to them of all the books that I've written. It's the 42nd book that I've written. Because I really believe that when we step back and look at our life, we begin to realize that there are other factors and other forces that are really directing the traffic and moving the checkers around in this checkerboard of our that we call our life. Because our life is really like a tapestry. And, you know, even the darkest threads in a tapestry add beauty to the tapestry. And I didn't leave out the dark threads, the struggles, the difficulties, the things that came along that when they happened, I was so devastated. At one time, essentially clinically depressed, if you will, unable to even hardly get out of bed. When my family, when I broke up, my wife and I separated 13 years ago. But out of that separation, we grew closer and closer. And I was able to write perhaps the most impactful book of all the books I'd written, the one that seemed to have made the biggest difference in people's lives. And I couldn't have written it without the compassion that I began to feel because of the pain that I was experiencing in my life over this thing that happened at the age of 60. I thought when you hit 60, you were out of junior high school and breaking up. But I wrote my way out of it and was able to help a lot of people with a book called The Power of Intention, which became a huge public television special. And that was another one of those significant events in my life. The woman that came to me and asked me to do a public television special, Nikki Vitale, that was in 1998. Public television is something that I really believe in very strongly because it's an energy that comes into our home that doesn't have the violence and doesn't have all the smarty pants talk between children and their parents and making funny jokes about how inept the parents are and so on. And I'm proud to say, as I sit here speaking to you today, that we've raised, with the 10 public television specials that I've done, $250 million for public television. Yeah. And the one that just aired this past month in March, on I Can See Clearly Now, on the which I'll be speaking about here this evening, raised quite a few $1 million already. So thank you again for contributing. Because when I was approached by public television to do it, they said that they would let me do one, but I would have to raise the money myself, and I would have to take care of the expenses and pay everything myself, and they would give it a trial. And it was one of the best investments I ever made. It was a turning point in my life. So here's what Rashad Field, in a wonderful book called To Know We Are Loved, wrote. And I was reading this, get some water. I was reading this book, which is one of a trilogy of books, To Know We Are Loved. And it's about a man who is dying. And he only has a short time left, but he is being approached by a Sufi student. And he talks about the most important thing that we have going for ourselves in our life is the awareness that deep within us we know that we are loved. It's what we all want to know. It's basically behind virtually every communication and every relationship that we have. I just want to know that I'm loved. When I was 10 years old, I was back from living in these series of foster homes, and my mother, who was abandoned by my father when I was just born, I was the youngest of three, and myself and my next oldest brother were placed in these homes, and my oldest brother went with my grandmother. And my mother spent the next decade seeing what she could do to get her family back together. This was in a time when there was a Great Depression going on in the world, and World War II was just underway. And it was one of the more trying times in her life. And I remember my very first time of meeting my oldest brother that I remembered, my brother Jim. And we're very, very close now. But he was, I was 10, he was 14. And we were in different worlds. And we were just getting to know each other. And I remember the thing that I felt the most as a 10-year-old was the fear that I was going to have to go back to that orphanage. Because it was always the same. It was always, yes, we'd go and we'd visit my mother once in a while, and then we'd always have to go back. She was working as during the war as a candy girl at Kresge's 5 and 10 cent store, earning $17 a week. And she would always feel so bad that we'd have to go back. And I can remember walking home every day from class wondering if I was going to come back. And it's one of the earliest memories that I have, and I can see clearly now, because it was at Arthur Elementary School. I was in the 4th grade. And every day at the end of the school day, about 2:45, there was a big clock on the wall. It had the name Seth Thomas on it. I don't know if any of you remember that, but I always wondered who that was. And I couldn't wait to see that hand get to the end so I could get out of there and get home. But Mrs. Ingalls, my 4th grade teacher, would read to us every day, provided that we were all behaved, that we were good in the class. That meant that we didn't talk and that we weren't disturbing people. And she read to us from a book that became one of the most exciting things I could hear every day. And when the class would start to get unruly, and it's amazing because when I started writing this and going back and writing this, all of these stories and all of this, the impact that they had in my life from being in the 4th grade all the way up to just recently, I was able to recall virtually every single person in my 4th grade class. And it was ironic that the woman who became my first wife, the mother of my first daughter, Tracy, was in that classroom. And you want to know something that's really strange? I just found that out. I thought I remembered everybody, but I didn't remember her. She was watching the PBS show in Tampa, Florida, and she called up Tracy, who is here tonight, who has a company that I'm going to tell you about in a few moments, and said, I was in Mrs. Ingalls' 4th grade class. I didn't know your dad was in that class. We were married for 8 years. I didn't even know she had gone to that school because I went to so damn many schools. I was only in that school for one semester, and they opened up a new school, and I went to Marquette Elementary from there. But anyway, the name of the book was called The Secret Garden. And I loved this book so much because it was a story about a 10-year-old. I was 10 years old. This was a girl. Her name was Mary. And she had discovered a secret garden. She was an orphan. I was an orphan. She had a very positive outlook on life. She was always excited about what possibly could happen. And the secret garden was really a place within each and every one of us could visit and explore and expand who we were. It wasn't about a place. It was about something inside each and every one of us. And I can remember I would walk home from that classroom, up Peerless Street and over to 7 Mile Road where I lived. And I used to think, I know that I have a secret garden in me because that's how I got through the previous 7 or 8 years in the various schools and so on, and helping my brother to learn this as well, who was a bit handicapped at that time. And it's very fascinating because it was just shortly after that I was, my mother had remarried. And I had a stepfather for just a few years, but he was really worse than my father, an alcoholic. It's like life gives exams. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. And if you don't pass, it's like algebra. You got to take it over. I think my mother had to take it over and do it over and over again. But my father was my stepfather rather was a Catholic, a very strict Catholic, and a big drinker. He drank every single day. But the thing that we had to do on Tuesday nights, when the Milton Berle show was on in 1952 and 1953, we didn't get to watch Milton Berle. We watched a man on television who wore funny clothes, whose name was Bishop Fulton Sheen, who was about to become a saint. And he had a show that I watched every Tuesday night, and I took notes on. I had yellow pad of paper at the age of 12 and 13. And every Tuesday, while the rest of the country was watching Milton Berle, I was watching Bishop Fulton Sheen on a television show called Life is Worth Living. I was taking notes on Life is Worth Living. 42 books that I've written could have all had the same subtitle, Life is Worth Living. And when I think about Bishop Sheen and I think about those Tuesday nights, I remember that that's when they started the Emmy Awards. And one of Milton Berle's great lines was, because he didn't win the Emmy, Bishop Sheen won the Emmy for the best television show. And he was asked about that, and he said, well, he had better writers. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He said, I couldn't compete with that. But I think about that, but I'm asking not so much that you understand my life, but that you look at your own. And you review the very significant events and faculties and circumstances and people and all the things that showed up in your life, and begin to have an awareness that there's something else making decisions about what it is that you are here for. It's almost as if you have to look at every single thing that ever happened to your life and recognize that it was all, there's some kind of divine guidance, always working, even in the toughest of times. And so as I was reading To Know We Are Loved, about this man who was dying, he was a beautiful spirit, a mystical man. And he said, if we stop for a moment, it is possible to perceive a pattern in our lives. The motivators that have influenced us become much more obvious. We are able to see the unfolding from both ends at once, coming into the present moment. But until we have got to a certain point of realization, this is not possible, because everything is still seen as a series of apparent causes and effects. And that struck me, and I'm going to read it again. I want you to really think about this as you look at your own life. And think about stepping back and having a recognition that all of the turns that you're making in your life, all of the U-turns that you've made, all of the shifts that just showed up in your life at a certain time, that there was something that was outside of your control that was moving the pieces around, and that it doesn't stop, that it's happening right now. Because just 4 weeks ago, something came into my life that has turned me in another direction in my life. And I've been obsessed by it. I wondered if I would talk about it. Because I could talk all night about so many different things that are up here, and 42 books. It would take me an hour to get my name out, you know, and yet here I am, sharing with you in a very personal way another turn that is overwhelming me with excitement about where I'm headed in the next phase or the next segment of this thing called my life. So I want you to stop for a moment and understand that it is possible to perceive a pattern in our lives. The motivators that have influenced us will become much more obvious. We are able to see life unfolding, and this is underlined because it was emphasized in the book, from both ends at once, coming into the present moment. That means from the past, what we think of as the past, and also from the future, that we are pulling things out of the future. My example of this is always, I have 8 children, 6 daughters, 2 sons, and whenever they're born, it's just the most miraculous event. I was there for the birth of 4 of those children. Cut the cord, all of those things. I wasn't allowed to do that before. In fact, we weren't even allowed on the same floor in those years. We had to sit and wait by the telephone, and wait to find out what we had. But there's an awareness that you look at this little child and that everything that it's ever going to need for its physical development is already there. And their wisdom teeth are there the day that they're born. We're not going to pull them out of the past. They're here. We're going to pull those out of the future. And that's like 20 years from now, and here we are, we're going to pull them out. Well, it's not just true from our physical things, it's true for everything, as I'll try to make clear as this evening unfolds. We're able to see life unfolding from both ends at once, coming into the present moment. But until we have got to a certain point of realization, this is not possible, because everything is seen as a series of apparent causes and effects. We have this tendency to believe that if you do this, then this is the cause of this, and then this is the cause of this, and so on. But I had a wonderful teacher. I was in my earliest training, I was going to become a Jungian analyst based on the teachings of the great Carl Jung, who passed away when I was 12 years old in 1952. And one of the things that Jung said, he said, from the beginning of my life, I had a sense of destiny, as though my life was assigned to me by fate and had to be fulfilled. This gave me an inner security, and though I could never prove it to myself, it proved itself to me. I did not have this certainty. It had me. I can really identify with Dr. Jung's comments. That I was being interviewed by the New York Times many years ago, and The great Arthur Miller was being interviewed at the same time. The famous playwright who wrote so many great plays, Death of a Salesman, and so many others. And he was asked the question, he was 91 years old, and he was asked the question, are you working on another play? And he responded, something I'd never forgot because I wrote it down, took notes on it. He said, I don't know, but I probably am. Now, on June the 26th in 2012, I told my entire family and my publisher that I was not going to write any more books. It was just too much pressure. That I had done enough, and that I was going to go on and do some other things, but this idea of having to face 500 empty sheets of paper and fill them from something in here, and everything that has got my name on it any place was written by me, by hand. And it's just such a draining experience. It's exciting, but it's just draining. It just takes so much out of, especially the way I write, because when I write, I'm just obsessed. It's morning, noon, night, go to sleep thinking about it, wake up. My children will tell you when they come in, when they visit me, that I have a pen with me, and I'll drive wherever I am, whatever room I'm in, wherever we are, even if we're in the car and I'm driving, I'll often pull over. I just had an idea. I think I'll add that, and it's and to do it that many times and to spend 40 or so years of my life doing just that, I said, that's enough. I don't have to prove it anymore. I'm done. My kids all said, yeah, Dad. And I said, well, I'll show you. That was the 26th of June. I said, and I felt so free. It's like I didn't have to have any more deadlines. I didn't have to think about what I was going to do that day. I could do other things. And on June the 27th, I'm not kidding, on June the 27th, I woke up and I started thinking about what took place when I was just a little boy, and when I was a teenager, and when I finally got out of the Navy, and when I went to college, and when I was a school teacher, and when I was a professor at a university, and when I left the professorship and went on to do the kind of work that I'm doing and to write, when I wrote erroneous zones after my textbooks, and all of it. And I wrote. And I would write an event about something that was so significant, and then I would look back and I'd write a section called I Can See Clearly Now. But I didn't really know what the title of this was going to be. I just decided that, and I talked to my publisher about it, and he said, didn't we talk yesterday about your not? I said, I know, but I said, this has just got a hold of me. And I took every book that I had written and I lined them up in front on a table. And I would start reviewing what happened in my life when I was writing them and so on, and what kind of events and what kinds of things were taking place. And I wrote morning, noon, and night. My children came to visit me in the summer in Maui. All of them came there, and there was no room in the place that I lived, so I had to go out and actually rent a place to write so that my kids could stay in my house, and I went someplace else so that I could write. And I was just obsessed with it. 90-some days of continuous writing, morning, noon, and night, and completed it all by hand, and it was all done. It's just this awareness that you're not making the decisions in your life. And so I was looking on the internet, and I saw you know how they'll put something on my Facebook page, and then it'll be just a little comment, or it'll be a photograph, or it'll be something, and they'll put it on there, and then there'll be all of these comments underneath it. And there are hundreds of them, sometimes thousands of them, every single day, because there's a couple of million people on that Facebook fan page. And I try to keep up with it and see what's going on with it and all of that. And one of the comments in something that I had written, a woman had said, you should read The Impersonal Life. Everything that you need for the rest of your life is in there. Now, I get books from people all the time. I'm sure people here have brought me, in fact, I've already had 3 or 4 given to me, and I've hardly been here, you know. And I've learned over the years, and I've learned especially in recent years, to not take any of that lightly, to understand that that the things that show up in your life, even if somebody hands it to you as a stranger, very often, especially if they impact you in a certain way, are going to have a could possibly be a turning point, something in your life, because in the 60 chapters that are in here, and I can see clearly now, very often I didn't have any idea what was going on. For example, after I wrote the textbooks, for the first 4 books that I wrote, from Your Erroneous Zones, Pulling Your Own Strings, The Sky's the Limit, and Gifts from Icus. These were 4 books that all were big-time bestsellers. And as I was writing this, I was looking through each of these books, and I looked at the index of Your Erroneous Zones, Pulling Your Own Strings, Sky's the Limit, Gifts from Icus. What Do You Really Want for Your Children was the other. And I looked in the index, and the name God, or Spirit, or Higher Consciousness appeared once in all 5 books. Once. The next book that I wrote, there were 37 references to God, Spirit, and Higher Consciousness. And I never, ever sat down and decided that I'm now going to start writing about something called spirituality, higher consciousness, and so on. It was just something that was unfolding. It was a direction that I was being pulled in. And we're all being pulled because all of us share something. Every single one of us shares something. We all come from the same place. And we all return to it. T.S. Eliot said, we shall not cease from exploration, but at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated, but to know it for the first time. To know it for the first time. Now, T.S. Eliot, I believe, because I've read a lot of his poetry, was speaking about death. We shall not cease from, at the end of all of our exploring, will be to return to the place from which we, and to know it, to really know it for the first time. I'm not talking about death here. I don't think we have to die to know it. I think we have to shift the direction that we are going in our life and lose the false self, the ego, the part of us that believes that who we are is what we have, and what we do, what we accomplish, and what others think of us. And that really is a false self. So these turns, these things that show up in our life. And this book showed up in my life from a posting on a Facebook page that I don't really study that often. And it just, something about it jumped out at me. So I called and ordered it. This is what it looks like. It's a little book. And if you read some of my recent books, like Wishes Fulfilled, that book was completely inspired by a little tiny book that I have right here with me. I carry with me wherever I go. It's called the I Am Discourses. That there is something inside each and every one of us called this I Am presence. And it's the director of our lives and the producer of our lives. And we sit here in these bodies and we believe that this is who we are. These bodies that we occupy, and these occupations that we have, and these duties that we perform. when in fact that's not who we are at all. Even being able to answer the question, who am I? So I ordered this book, The Impersonal Life, and it was written in 1914, exactly 100 years ago today. And it was published in 1917, the year that we got into World War I. And it was published under the name Anonymous, because it turns out that the person who wrote this book was a minister, like my friend Roger Teal, at his great church that I have been speaking at since 1976. That's almost 40 years ago. But the things that he was writing were just so outside of the box of the church that he was a minister in that he didn't want to be identified. I think he just felt he might be excommunicated or whatever. So he published it as anonymous. And he really felt that it was God, or the Tao, or Spirit. But remember, urgently remember, it isn't what we call this thing that is moving all the pieces around, the place from which we originated, the place to which we return. Many of you know that I wrote a book a few years ago, when I turned 65, 9 years ago, called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, which is based on the Tao, and I became a Taoist for a year. Not because I thought Taoism is something that I want to go out and explore, but because I was called to do it. That there is a calling for each and every one of us, and it's operating all the time. And it's one of the great revelations that I've had in my own life about, I can see clearly now, is that there is a divine intelligence that we are connected to. But we've lost our connection to it, except in very rare occasions. So, in 1940, the year I was born, this man's wife, this is the year he died, the man's name was Joseph Benner, B-E-N-N-E-R, Joseph Benner. And after he passed away, his wife decided to reveal who it was that had written this book called The Impersonal Life. A side note on The Impersonal Life, it's the book that Elvis Presley, carried with him wherever he went and was with him when he died. He said it was the only book that ever truly spoke to him and helped him to do the kinds of things that he was doing in his life in the way of his music and so on. Not a great endorsement, Elvis, you know, it's like... In fact, one of the examples I give in here is why I wrote Pulling Your Own Strings After Your Erroneous Zones, is because the day that Elvis died, when they discovered that he had been so victimized by his drug use and drug abuse, that I wanted to write a book about helping people not to be victimized by such things in their life. And it was his death that inspired me to move in the direction that I'm moving in my life. So in 1941, it was republished as The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner. But there's not even an author on this copy that I have. So one of the things that I discovered as I started to read this, it was just one of those books that just spoke to me. It was and I talked to my children and talked to people that are close to me in my life, and one of them is my wife, with whom I've been separated since the year 2001. I asked her to read it so we could talk about it, because she's really a soulmate to me. And that can't be the time. My goodness. And it was one morning, not too long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and after my first reading of this book, there's 18 chapters in here, just like in the Bhagavad Gita, and very similar to the Bhagavad Gita. And as I would read each chapter each day, I would think about it, and I would write notes on it, and I would just wonder, because basically the essence of this is called the impersonal life, that there is a part of us that is connected to our source of being. Call it what you want. The opening line of the Tao says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. So you can call it God, you can call it spirit, you can call it consciousness, you can call it divine mind, you can call it I am presence, which is what he calls it. So I'm just going to call it God. It works for me. And I got the mic. So I can call it anything I want to call it, right? So the last chapter in here is called Union. And the 17th chapter in here is called Finding Me. And me, the word me, is not some external God speaking and writing this book, but me is the impersonal, that is not just for Wayne, or not just for Sally, or not just for Mike, but the impersonal consciousness that is located in each and every one of us. That from which we originated, that to which we return, and it's that thing that animates all of life. So if you were to close your eyes and say, what is my life? What is life? Whatever it is that animates you and allows you to breathe, to take a breath, you can't do that. Your personality can't do the things that this I am presence is always doing, always operating. You can't make your lungs aspirate and take in air and let it out. Your personality can't take the food that you put into your mouth and digest it. It can't do that. It doesn't know how to. I always remember the movie with George Burns, Oh God, remember? And he said, now make a fish from scratch, then you got something, you know. The I am presence can do that. It does everything. It animates all of life. And our personalities can't do any of that. Every breath that we take is orchestrated and controlled and delivered by a presence that is invisible. And there's only one of it. It's in everything that exists in the physical world. The stones, the animals, the plants, us. It's this intelligence. And we carry it around with us at all times. This divine mind, this I am presence, it's always there. Finding me. How do you find me? And union. The whole purpose, what I want to talk about, the rest of my life, or at least the next few years of it, if I'm granted them, because again, that's not up to me either. When you get called, you get called. You know, he often says in there that, you know, you showed up here in the 20th century. Why didn't you show up 100 years from now? Why did you show up in this country and not in another country? Something is taking care of all of that for you. You don't have the power to be able to do these things. And we carry around this divine intelligence that's capable of doing anything, that is omniscient and omnipotent and all-knowing. It's everywhere at once. We have that within us. We carry it around wherever we go. It's this incredible intelligence. And we all carry it around, and yet we act like we are weak. And we have a subconscious mind that has been programmed to believe that we're ordinary. And we can't create miracles, and we can't accomplish fantastic things. I've just discovered that within me there's this miracle worker who is capable of manifesting and creating. I mean, all of this stuff that I've written and all of these things that I'm doing, even my giving this talk right now, it's not my personality that is doing it. Every desire that you have is placed there by something that you have no control over. Every desire, every thought. In the Tao, it says, Lao Tzu says, 2,500 years ago, you're not doing anything, you're just being done. You're just being done. If you don't believe that, just look in the mirror. I've got pictures of myself on the wall when I was 21 years old, and I can't find one cell of that body that was here 50 years ago. And yet, when I was in it, I believed that's who I was. I was certain this is who I am. Just like right now, I'm certain this is who I am. And a year from now, you'll see things are different. Things are changing. Who's growing these hairs in my nose and making them fall off my head? What is that about? Now when I shave, and then I have to shave over here on my ear and make sure that I don't... I didn't decide any of that. So this idea that we carry around a genius within us that is capable of reconnecting itself to our source of being. And I was contemplating the idea of how do I really connect to it, because it is capable, it created me, it is capable of anything that I place my attention on. It's capable of it. How do I get it? How do I find it? How can I really come to know it and make it work for me in ways that I never dreamt of before? And I've dreamt big and accomplished big. I've come here with big dharma. There's no question about it. Millions and millions, maybe 1 billion people know who I am and read the work that I do. I've got hundreds of millions of books out there and endless CDs and so on. And it's like, that's really big dharma. And yet, there's this humble part of me inside that wonders, why me? Why, when I was a year old, was I lying on a snowbank with my 2 brothers and my mother that had just been thrown us by slushy, a truck went by and threw us into this land, and my mother was holding her 3 little kids. I was 1, my brother was 2, my next brother was 4, and this was just before we were put into the home. And this truck went by in a morning, it was in December of 1941, right after Pearl Harbor, and we all threw back on it. My mother is all upset. She's got dirty, slushy water all over her. We're on a snowbank. My brother Jim is all crying and all upset. My brother Dave is weirded out, because he was always weirded out when he was a little kid. And I'm laying there saying, this is great. This is fantastic. Look, we got a snow. And it's like, Why was, and my mother's favorite story about me was always, this was you, Wayne. This was you were always looking for something positive, no matter what it was, and nothing could get you down. And why was I reading The Secret Garden? And why was I watching and taking notes on a book, on a television show called Life is Worth Living? And I could go on with the stories of that taking place. And now you look at your own life. And not only look at your own life in terms of all of the things that happened and the different kinds of time that I talked about on the PBS show, and I talk a little bit about, horizontal time, chronological time, and then there's, that cause and effect time, and then there's vertical time. And I talked about Carl Jung saying that he didn't have this idea, it had him. He said, at the same moment that you're a protagonist in your own life and you're making choices, at the very same moment, you're also the spear carrier or the extra in a much larger drama. And then he concluded with this. This is a brilliant scholar. He said, in essence, you are all doomed to make choices. That's what I Can See Clearly Now is about. Understanding the paradox of being doomed to make choices. You see, if you take it with you, if you take your physical body and look at your physical body, you can say, okay, I happen to be in a 6'2" male body with blue eyes, who's Caucasian, who's got, and so on. This is the body, and I'm doomed. This is it for this lifetime. This is the body that I get. It's going to grow into what this is. But I can also make choices about being doomed. And the choices I can make are, I can be healthy, I can watch what I eat, I can exercise this body, I can make this body as strong and vibrant and vital with all of the choices that I make about how I treat this body, which is really, as the Sufis say, if you don't have a temple in your heart, you'll never find your heart in a temple. This is a temple. And it is such an amazing temple with trillions of cells in it, all working together in one unity. And so while I was doomed with this body, I'm not going to show up in this incarnation in a female body, in a body that has, dark skin instead of fair skin, and so on. So you're making choices. Now the question is, do you understand what Jung was speaking about for the rest of your life? Doomed? Yes. Your life is laid out for you. It really is. You signed up for it. When I had a conversation with God, before I ever entered this world, God said, what do you want to do when you come into this lifetime? And I said, well, I think I'd like to teach self-reliance this time around. And God said, are you sure? You want to spend an entire lifetime teaching self-reliance? I said, yes, that's what I want to do. He said, then we better get your little ass into an orphanage, don't you think? So. And there's no better place to learn self-reliance than in an orphanage, right? Because there's not going to be any parents there, which is a huge advantage in many ways. No parents. Wow. And I know, because once you learn how to rely upon yourself when you're a young child, no one can ever take that away from you and say, well, it really doesn't apply. It's really other people's fault the way things are, and so on. You can never buy into that. And that's true for our whole lives, including the dark threads, including the struggles and the things that come along. As Elizabeth Kubler-Ross once said, who was a dear friend of mine before she passed on, she said, if you shield the mountain from the windstorms, you'll never see the beauty of the carvings. If you try to take the storms of your life out, they are adding beauty to the tapestry that is your life as well. The thing to do is to learn how to be in a state of appreciation and gratitude for the things that show up in your life as they show up, instead of waiting and creating something called enlightenment through suffering, where you go through a long period of time and then you look back and say, now I know. That's what I did with I Can See Clearly. I look back And I could see this is exactly what I had to do, and there were certain things I had to do, which I'll be talking about. So I'm reading this book, and I'm up to like chapter 16 or 17, I don't know exactly. I just finished another complete reading of this today. And I'm thinking, I meditate, and I get quiet, and I watch what I eat, and I exercise as much as I possibly can, and I try to be as loving as I possibly can. I try to live from a place of divine love, which is why I have it on my shirt wherever I go. What's the answer, Wayne? Love, period. That's it. That's what I did my PBS show in. But it's still, I know I carry around, I know that this ego of mine, this part of me that has believed that who I am is what I have and do and accomplish and what others think of me and all of that, is not really my essence. But how do you come to a place where you are living in such a way that the highest place within you, this God that is within each and every one of us, that we all carry around with us wherever we go, that it becomes that my person, see, this is the impersonal life, that my personal life, which means my personality and all of its components, like my mind, my body, and everything that I do, that it becomes in harmony with this essence from which I originated, and living from that place. And it's a week ago Thursday, or so, maybe 2 weeks ago now, and I go to the bank usually on Thursday, and cash checks and just do all the things that you do at a bank. And there's a woman at the bank. Her name is Cheyenne, and she has twin boys, 3 years old, and another child, 4 years old, and a husband who has diabetes, because he's overweight, but he's incapacitated, he can't work. So she's a bank teller, and she basically provides for her husband and her 3 children. Her husband's this big man who's just let his life get out of control. And whenever I leave there with some, because my kids come to visit me, so you always need cash. Lots of it. I have 8 kids, and they like cash. They have an addiction to cash. So it was. Now I know that Cheyenne goes to lunch at 20 minutes to 11. Early lunch, but she goes 20 to 11 till 11:45 every day. And when she hands me back the cash that I take, in an envelope, I always take one $100 bill, and I put it underneath her little computer thing there. And I've been doing this for the last couple of years, just so that she'll have an extra $100 every week for helping her out. And then I stop at the dry cleaners on the way home, and there's a little lady in there. She's about 4'10", real hefty lady, but she works in a dry cleaning place where, you know what a dry cleaning plant looks like? I mean, hot and steamy, and she's not a very physically attractive looking woman, and and whenever I go in there, I always slip her $100, just because I just think what it would be like to have to stay in that hot, steamy room in Maui, handing people their clothes and ironing things and so on. And she doesn't have a family. She doesn't have anybody that really loves her except me. So I try to do something for her. And those are 2 of the things, and there's others. But so this is Thursday morning, and I know I have to go to the bank, and I just can't stop thinking about Cheyenne and Elsie, this lady at the dry cleaners. And I think, well, I'll just go to the bank later because I had all of these things to do that day. And something inside of me, now this is what I want you to understand. It's like Napoleon Hill, when he wrote Think and Grow Rich, said that the thing that separates out highly functioning, self-actualizing people that Maslow spoke about, my teacher, Maslow, he said, is that they have within them something called a burning desire. And a burning desire isn't just a desire. And all desires, as I said earlier, are placed in there by this I am presence within us. Every desire that you have doesn't come from your personality. It is placed there. Ask yourself, close your eyes, ask yourself, what is it that puts a desire inside of me? And know that it is that which animates all of life. It can't be stopped. It can't be changed. I can't postpone going off to the bank. I don't want to get there and Cheyenne not be there. It didn't matter when I go to the bank, but I had to be there before her lunch break. And I couldn't get that thought out of my mind. So I just said, screw it. Not a real spiritual thing. I didn't actually say screw it. I said something else, but we're on television here. So I said, F it. Forget it. Forget it. I don't know where your minds are, but I'm just... So I just drop everything that I'm doing. I set it all down, all the stuff that I had to get done. I just put it all aside. I said, I have to go to the bank now. I was being driven to go to the bank, and the reason I was driven to go to the bank that morning was to give Cheyenne that extra $100 that I thought she might need. And we've never talked about that $100, and I've probably given it to her 100 times at least in the last couple of years, because I do it every week. And sometimes it's more. At the holidays, it's a lot more. But we've never talked about it. Because I don't want her to get into trouble at the bank for taking money from a customer. She might not be allowed to do that. I don't know. So it's just sort of this silent thing between us. So I go to the bank. I do exactly what I told you. I put the $100 down. She puts it in. She brings it up in her hand, puts it in. I go to the cleaners. I see Elsie, all sweating, and she comes over. Oh, it's so good to see you. And she one time asked me if I was God. And I said yes, and so are you. You just don't know it, and I do. It's true. And she just, you would think I'd given her $1 million when she sees me. She just can't even believe that someone would do this for her. And I get back, and I actually stopped another place and did something else for somebody that I often do as well at this Starbucks place. And then I get home, okay? And I'm going to read chapter 17. I'm not going to read the whole chapter, although they're short chapters. I had no idea this talk was going to go like this tonight, but I hope you're enjoying it. Thank you. So it's in the chapter called Finding Me. And yes, it is chapter 17. It's the second to the last chapter. The last chapter is called Union. That is, once you find me, how do you stay connected to me? And the me, the person that is writing this from the first person, is you as God, the highest part of you, that is putting desires in there, that is controlling all of your thoughts, that is the invisibleness. It's like we can find the command center in our bodies where all the things that we do and all the choices that we make are taking place. We can always find the command center, go into the brain, and we can locate it and find out what is causing me, what's allowing me to move my hand across here, or to wiggle my toes, or to flip my fingers, or whatever. We can find the command center. The scientists are really good at finding the command center. But I'm not talking about the command center here tonight. I'm talking about the commander in the command center. that is saying, I think I'm going to wiggle my finger. I can't do that. My personality can't do that. I can't have that thought myself. I need something bigger than me to place that thought in there. As it says in the Tao, you're not doing anything, you're being done. Also, you're not thinking anything, you're being thought. You are not the one who is responsible for your thinking. Your thinking is placed there for you to elevate your consciousness, even the thoughts and the desires that are going to result in failure. Because the way that we need to accomplish things very often is to fail. Not only as individuals, but as a people. And that's what wars are. And that's what a cancer cell is in our body. It's a cell that has lost its connection to the whole. And it will kill the very host that keeps it alive. It's got dis-ease within it. Like each and every cell in our body is a cell that is impersonal, except for the ones that love themselves so much that they want to gobble up the cell next to them, and that's what we call cancer. Otherwise, the trillions of cells within us are all impersonal. They are all just doing what they do in connection to staying connected to this whole called our body. Try to imagine that you are one cell amongst trillions of cells in a body called humanity or God. That we are attributes of God. That's how it's spoken in here. The best and the surest way you may know me being the God that you carry around with you at all times, the best and the surest way you may know me is when selfless love fills your heart. And there is a strong, compelling urge to help someone, to heal their ills, to relieve their suffering, to bring them happiness, to point out the true way. That is the actual feel of me, God, within you, pushing the personality aside, using your mind and your body for the purpose I created them as avenues for the expression of my real nature, which is perfect love, the Christ of God, the one vitalizing, quickening, life-giving, strengthening, healing, all-supplying, all-informing power in the universe. It is in you, and you will recognize it and be able to use it and access it and make it work for you when you experience selfless love, or there is a strong, compelling urge to help someone. And that, as I came back from the bank, and I was going to read this chapter before I went on to do what else I was going to do that day, which was some writing. And I thought, oh my God, that's the answer. It's so simple. Whenever you have a compelling desire inside of you to do something for someone else, that's it saying to you, here I am, inside of you. When it opens this book, the 8 most important words in the English language from the Bible: be still. I'd like you to do that right now. Just be very still. Be still and know that I am God. Be still. Try to get very still right now. Close your eyes even. And know, beyond any doubt, that I am God. Now, who is the I am? Who is that? That's the name that God gave to Moses in Exodus. When Moses asks the burning bush that is not being consumed, what is your name? Who is it that is directing me to Egypt, to the Pharaoh, to free these people, my people? Who is it? What is your name? Who is sending me? My name is I am that I am, and that shall be my name for all future generations. Every time you say the name I am, you are saying the name of God. But you can't do it yourself. That thought of I am is that divine perfect love that is within you. And it starts to knock on your noggin and say, somebody needs to be helped. What can you do? And you have this to push aside your ego. It's overwhelming. You can't stop it. Now, I experienced this several times in my life. One of the times I experienced it was when I was diagnosed with leukemia, which many of you know about. I wrote about it in one of my books, Wishes Fulfilled. And I had a remote healing and then an actual meeting with John of God, this man who has treated over 40 million people without ever charging them, someone that Roger has gone to and is going, again, is that right, Roger? Next month? Many of you may have seen the show I did with Oprah Winfrey on that experience I've had with John of God. I had to submit even my medical records to show that I had leukemia so that we could talk about it, because that was one of the requirements for talking about it with Oprah. And after that show, Oprah flew her own plane down to, well, she didn't fly it, but she went on the plane, down to Abidjan. And had a remarkable experience as a result, a healing experience. When I haven't got time to go into it, but when I had that healing experience with John of God, 3 years ago, what these entities did is they removed the fear that the word leukemia has, the cancer of the blood, and replaced it with love. And I was in San Francisco just a couple of weeks later at the St. Francis Hotel making a film about my father called My Greatest Teacher. One of the chapters, and I can see clearly now how forgiveness was such a powerful part of my life, and having to forgive this man who abandoned us and spent years in jail, raped my mother on many occasions, including my own conception on the 1st of September, 1939. My mother told me about before she passed away, and how close she came to having an abortion because she already had 2 children and a man who was a drunk, mean drunk person, but went a different direction. And what happened on that, to me, after that fear was removed, was that I was able to make more contact with the I am presence that is within me, that all of us have within us. Each and every person in here has it. Everything that is alive is animated by this invisible divine intelligence. Everything that has life in it. And that means everything, including this plastic water bottle. Everything. And on my 71st birthday, all I wanted to do that morning was to get up and go out to the Union Square.